Hello, welcome to the chapter on teaching musical phrasing, coordinated to the chapter in my saxophone pedagogy book. So let's talk a little bit about how you would help a student understand what phrasing is and get a start on it. Here's a little idea that I use. So let's say that I have three notes. Oh, I'm going to change to my classical setup. Yawn, not much interest there. What if I did this to them? Now there's a lot more pathos in that. You can feel something from that. That's what I call the three-note cell. So what makes this three-note cell work musically? Because the first three-note cell has virtually no musical interest. So I've done some dynamics. I've also used my vibrato to do what? To enhance the second note as my principal, most important note. That's my stress note. The first note is a pickup note to the stress note. The third note is a release note from the stress note. And what happens is it makes the whole thing breathe. Stravinsky said that music has to have respiration. I think that's what he meant. Music has to breathe. It has to have tension, release. We just brought those dead notes to life. So what we have here then is three categories of notes. Pickup notes can be many pickup notes. Stress note, usually only one. Release notes could be multiple release notes, even two or three, but usually one or two or three. And so I'm doing this. I'm starting with a small dynamic on the pickup note, crescendoing into the stress note, and then diminuendoing to the release note. I'm also withholding the vibrato on the first note, the pickup note, and then so it enhances the stress on the stress note by using the vibrato on that note more, and then less but still vibrato on the release note, and then trying to go out to M. So that's what I call the three-note cell. Every note on a piece of paper with music on it is in one of those three categories, and that's where our musicianship comes in. How do we decide which notes are the stress notes? Then what are the pickup notes? What are the release notes? In the book, I have written a little part out of the Schumann Romance. This is actually an oboe piece, but it was being fixed for saxophone by our friend Fred Hemke. This is what Schumann wrote. This is actually the B idea in the first Romance. So we got 8 quarter notes in a row here. That's what's written. How do I get the music out of this? All right, which notes are stress notes? Which notes are release notes? These things are written out in the book, but this is a good stress note. Then my next two notes are pickup notes. There's my stress note. Release note. There's a three-note cell on the end of it. So I have 3 stress notes, 3 pickup notes, 2 release notes. And all of a sudden this has come to life. It's breathing. We have, the notes are not all created equal. Anytime the notes are all created equal, there is no phrasing. It's as if I spoke like this, where every syllable is equally important, then there is no phrasing. No, when we speak, certain words require emphasis. And really, there's other words that aren't that important. We just kind of throw them away. And that's what I'm doing here with the music. I have to bring this to life in that way. I love the example of the Bach Fourth Flute Sonata. The first lines are all 16th notes. And if you just play them as all equal notes, there's nothing of interest here. The notes are dead. They're not breathing. There's no life to this line. Well, what if I performed it this way? Dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da dee da da dee da 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 da da. You see what's happening here is now I have certain notes that matter. The other notes lead to their importance or release from them. And if I understand how to find those notes in my piece, I understand how to phrase it. Now it sounds like I'm speaking something that has some meaning. I'm saying something. So this is what we have to get across to the students. It's the same in bebop. I mean, if Charlie Parker, if we just play this, every note's equally important. It means nothing. But if I play, now the top notes of the contours are very important. Those top notes of contours are actually giving us the melodic contour of the piece. So got some shape in there. I'm breathing. I brought the thing to life. All right, so these are some of the tenets, I think, of phrasing that help us to get started. Yeah, I think that probably makes that point, that we have to figure out which notes are our stress notes, then which notes are leading to those stress notes, how do we use them to enhance the importance of the stress note, and then how do we use the release notes so that we're making the thing breathe and come to life. That's what I would do with those slower notes like that. It's a little harder to say, okay, how do we phrase when we have fast notes? What about 16th note phrases? I'm just going to use a scale for this example. I often hear a scale played like this. Well, this is not musical to me at all, but I often hear scales played just that way. What's the problem? All the accents are in the same place. Everything's created equal. The other problem is that because I'm thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's jerking 1 to 2. 1 becomes very unimportant because it's the shortest note of all the notes. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 becomes the most important of the notes. This is backwards musically. The most important note should be the 1. Now I've got something that's shaping more musically. It has forward motion. When I do this, the motion's stopping every 4 notes. It's actually taking a little lull on 4. What we want instead. I'm exaggerating that, but I want the 1 to matter, and then 2, 3, 4 are pickups. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. I mentioned Marcel Tabito in the book, principal oboist of the Philadelphia, wonderful player and very big proponent of musical note grouping. And that's what I'm talking about here, is how do we group these notes so that they phrase musically? I call it phrase drive. Tabito said it was like walking. He said, in order to take a step, one must first lift the foot. That's the 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. That's how we get the forward motion. If there's no motion, there's no emotion. Motion is a function, emotion is a function of motion. I have to create motion in the line. If I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, the motion is stopping every 4 notes. If I go 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Now I've got some forward drive in that. So I call this principle phrase drive. And I want my students to play their scales and all their materials with phrase drive. So what does that mean? Here's what I would have the student do. First, I'm going to have them, first I'll have them play it the way they normally do so they can feel the difference when we get done with this process. But, and it's usually jerking like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That is anti-music. So what I need to do here is I'm going to have the students play the ones with an exaggerated length, and then play the 2, 3, 4 as a pickup to the following one. I think in the book I wrote it this way. Do it either way, but I'm exaggerating the lengths of the ones. I'm gonna have that repeated at least a half a dozen times. Let's say we've done that. Then the second step, accent the 2s. We're going to play more evenly again now, not exaggerate the length of the 1 so much, but accent the 2. Now these are not tongue, this is all slurred, so it'll just be a breath pulse. Accent the 2s. Again, let's repeat this at least a half a dozen times. And you'll see, like, if you haven't been doing this, that it's really against the grain. You want to accent 1s. No. Accenting 1s is your worst problem because that's what's going to minimize the 1, not help to accent it. Doing this accents the 1. But see, there's more than one kind of accent. We don't just pump it. We're actually giving it a little more of an agogic accent where we get it gets more weight on the note from its length. All right, now after a while I say, can you do that a little faster? Can you do it yet faster and still accent it? Now, sometimes it'll sound like this. No, we want the air to be continuous through the notes. Okay, the last step. Think the accent, but don't physically do it. Now the scale sounds more musical. I think that this 3-step process has helped a lot with getting my students to be able to get this kind of phrase drive happening in their 16th note lines. So what is it again? 1, hold the 1s extra time. 2, accent the 2s. 3, mentally accent the 2s, but don't do it physically. And this brings us to our finished product, where it feels like we're using the right forward drive in the phrase. This will create music. It will create motion. Give a couple of examples I forgot to pull out. So I've got up number 3 in the Close A 25 Daily Studies. The first thing I'm going to have the student do is this. Let's not go that far, take too much time. And then I'll have them do that a half a dozen times on a portion of it. And then I'd go accent on 2. And then I will have them think the accent. Something like that. And I've got some phrase drive going in this. I feel like this is one of the most important uses for the Close A 25 Daily Studies, is to ingrain grouping. And if it's 6s, you know, that last measure is really a trap. 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. That's an enemy of phrasing. So I'm going to work over time on that measure to think it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. I've got some phrasing out of it by thinking the larger grouping, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. If it's triplets, that'll be number 6 over here. Okay, what's my phrasing? 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Now I've exaggerated that a little bit. Better. Now I can put the articulation in afterwards. That's another big value of the Close 25 daily studies is learning the articulation style of mixed slurs and staccatos. And I think we talk about that in a different chapter, so on the articulation chapter, I'll come back on that. Or after that, but we'll come back on that. The other great thing about this book, besides technical facility too, I think there's 3 purposes, maybe 4: grouping, technical facility, and articulation style, but also choosing breathing places. There are no breathing places in here. How do I choose a breathing place? Well, at first I want my students to breathe after a 1. 2, 3, 4, 1. When we arrive at the 1, that's our goal. That would be the time to breathe. That would sound like this. So I'm breathing after a 1. There are some ones that are better than other ones, and of course I chose in that case the ones that came at the end of a harmonic resolution. Those are the best places to breathe when you've actually reached a resolution. You don't want to breathe in the middle of a pattern. If I've got, it's really clear that I broke that up because I've got an expectation set up. The pattern has set up an expectation that I did not fulfill, and it's not satisfying to the listener. So I also like to have the students breathe at the bottom lower part of the line as opposed to the top part of the line. It's less obvious at the low part of the line. And over a little period of time, at first I just want to be sure that they're breathing after a 1. Then it's like, okay, now some ones are better than other ones, so where should we breathe here? And then several concepts on that, and then pretty soon the student starts to understand, oh, I breathe at the end of a sentence, a musical sentence, or I breathe at a comma or a semicolon. I don't breathe in the middle. It's like I don't want to breathe just before the last word of the sentence. Break it up in a weird way. So I feel like that's a really good value of this as well, is learning how to choose good breathing places. I do compare musical phrasing to speech phrasing, as I did a little bit ago. And sometimes I use this example with my students. I tell them, when my kids were growing up, what have I got here? Here's a downbeat. When my kids were growing up, they had to do reports for school, and then they had to read their report in front of the class. And so they would practice reading the report in front of me for help before they read it to their class. And usually it would sound something like this. I'm just picking something completely randomly out of the Downbeat magazine. Let's see. After revisiting more than a decade of memories, I posted my thoughts and walked away from the laptop. I'd instilled myself for a rapid drop-off in friend and count, and even in chillier reception at jam sessions whenever those again became possible. When I logged back in, however, I saw that friends and contemporaries from around the world had reposted and commented with insightful and sincerity, publicity, and privately. Musical peers shared their own sense of... I said, wait a minute. I can't understand what you're saying. You see those periods? We need a little knowledge, a little acknowledgement that those are periods. Take a little break there. Make a little hole. Make a little space. If you got at the end of a paragraph, make a bigger space. If you've got a comma, then it may not be quite as big a space, but there's still a space. Or if there's a semicolon. So now if I put the punctuation in, after revisiting more than a decade of memories, I posted my thoughts and walked away from the laptop. I steeled myself for a rapid drop-off in friend count and an even chillier reception at jam sessions, whenever those again become possible. When I logged back on, however, I saw that friends and contemporaries from around the world had reposted and commented with insightful sincerity. You get the idea. If I read that way, then I'm showing that I understand the phrase structure of the sentences, and it means a lot more to my listener. It's the same musically. All right, just handling quickly here this issue. What about when there is no one? We're grouping 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And then all of a sudden we have a thing that goes 2, 3, 4, rest. There's no 1 there. What do I do now? This happens quite often. Here's an example from the Dubois Concerto. So if I think 2, 3, 4, just fell off the edge of the cliff. No, here's the principle. Whenever you don't have a 1, then the second to the last note is your stress note. That's the note you're aiming at. And the last note is your release note from that. So stress on the second to last note. Sometimes this happens even when there is a 1 written. We realize that we want to phrase as if there wasn't. This would be an example from the Bozza. So even though there is a 1, I feel like I want to put the second to last note on stress, last note release, and a phrase, a little bit of a lift. Even though there is a 1, I'm going to phrase it as if there wasn't. This takes a little experience. Here'd be an example that's kind of quick, but... So we've got a question and an answer. And the way I phrase that, the way it's written is just all 16ths. Okay, the way I get the phrasing out of that is slow motion. 3, 4, 1. Now you get the idea. I want to bring up one more thing. Well, maybe 2 more things. We have situations where we have to imitate what string players do when they have 2 down bows in a row. Let's say that I have 2 notes like this. Maybe these are the last notes of the piece. String players will play a down bow. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. Even maybe this a little bit. String players will play a down bow when the note's in a stressful position, and they'll play up bow for the notes that are in weaker positions. So if I'm playing 8th notes, ba-da-dee-a-dum, I've got my down bows in the strong positions. What happens when I have 2 down bow notes in a row? In other words, I have two important stress notes. Then I got to have a down bow for the strength of this note and a down bow for the strength of this note. Bum, bum. Well, what's happening in the string world here? How do I get 2 down bows without an up bow? Bum. Well, I have to lift. I'm going to come out a little bit farther. Come out a little bit farther where you can see me. I have to lift, and then, I down bow, then I lift my bow, bring it back up, re-engage at the frog, bum, down bow again. The way I get 2 down bows in a row is to lift the bow off the string while I'm moving the bow back up. What's the string doing? What's the string doing while I'm lifting the bow? Well, it's still vibrating. It's still ringing. But it's decaying. It's ringing out. there's a decay there. So if I'm to simulate this on the saxophone, I have to go bum, bum. And you know what? It's not even going to ring all the way out before I have the next note. It'll be like bum, bum. There's an illusion of space, but no actual space. Bum, bum. Now it feels like those notes are spaced, but there's actually never a moment when it's not vibrating. Bum, bum. Well, I need to simulate it on the saxophone. So what am I doing? Well, we call it a lift on the saxophone after the string players. I'm putting a lift between those notes. What does that mean? I'm doing a diminuendo. The vibration is decaying, but it probably doesn't go all the way down before I hit the next note. I don't want where there's an actual stop of vibration in there. So we often find places where we need to do this. Syncopations are a great example. I'll put that little tiny lift in there. And that is just done with a very quick diminuendo, and then reassert for the next note, so it sounds like what a string player would do with 2 down bows. One other thing, when we have note groupings that are bigger than 4, for example, 5s, 7s, 11s, 13s, and so on, I always tell my students that we can't count higher than 4 if we're musicians. We have to be able to break those bigger numbers down into 2s, 3s, and 4s. So with the group of 5, it'd be 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2 plus 3. Could be 3 plus 2. It just depends on whether you're stopping or trying to move forward. There is a great example of that. Let me grab that. It's in the ending of the Dubois. So the Dubois first movement ends this way. There's a group of 5 right there. Well, I don't actually want the 2 plus 3 because that feels like I'm accelerating. I want to feel like I'm putting the brakes on here because it's the end. So it's like. It helps to put the brakes on and pull it to grind down to a halt. I think that's a good example of that. However, there are many other examples where we might have a larger grouping of notes that need to be phrased. Maybe I have a group of 10, let's say. And so I go 2 plus 4 plus 4. I like to do that when the first note's tied over. What is that? It's out of the tableau. Yeah. So I'm going to go tie to the first note of 2. The second note of the 2 will be like a pickup to 2 groups of 4. Now you see what I'm saying? I'm going to find the best grouping. So if you have 7, it could be 2 plus 2 plus 3. Could be 2 plus 3 plus 2. Could be 3 plus 4. Could be 4 plus 3. Which one's going to fit the music the best? Most of the time when you get one of these kind of sweeps, you're looking for it to drive you to a goal. And therefore I would choose the slower rhythm first and the faster rhythm second, so it feels like it accelerates and drives me up to my goal with a little better, a little more energy. So for example, let's say I've got a group of 7. If I go a group of 4, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da, well, a group of 3 is a little slower than a group of 4. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da is going to feel like it's slowing down. That's why I did 3 plus 2 on that group of 5 in the Dubois. But normally I would do 2 plus 3 because 2 feels slower, ba-da-dee-da-da-da, and 3 feels like it accelerates. Now with that 7, I would go be-da-da-dee-da-da-dum, triplet, and then the 4/16. It's going to sound like it accelerates. This is going to give me better musical motion. And remember that in all of phrasing, motion is key. It's the motion that creates the emotion, and this constitutes what we call phrasing. So thank you for watching. I hope this is helpful, and I'll see you in another video.